Eddie was so excited for all the Halloween candy he was about to get that he hadn't even dressed up before going door to door. As soon as school let out, he began asking every house on the street for some, even when they clearly weren't prepared. He didn't have much success until he came across a mysterious old man with a bag of candy, as if he was waiting for the boy on the street bench. "Young man, don't you know it's rude to be trick or treating this early? These people are barely getting off work," he said, eyeing the boy. "Yeah, but I know they have candy waiting. I just want to get some before the rest of the kids take it all," Eddie replied, oblivious to his annoying behavior. "You're not even dressed up. What do you want to be for Halloween? Perhaps I can be of assistance," he said, beginning to rummage through his bag of candy. "I want to be a tiger. Tigers are so cool, big, strong, and scary." "Ah, I have just the thing," he said, pulling out a roll of orange candies. He handed it to the excited boy with a devilish smirk, eagerly awaiting the chaos he was about to sow tonight. "Wow, thanks, mister. What was your knot?" Eddie cut himself off as he looked up and saw that the old man had vanished from the street. The boy didn't think much of it though and continued to make his way down the rows of houses, popping the candies into his mouth as he went. As he chewed the last one, he suddenly felt a chill run through his body. He stopped in his tracks to look himself over, nervously realizing that he'd gotten taller than he was a few minutes ago. Not only that, but his chest was beginning to tingle. He watched in confusion as his nipples began to grow and harden, their grown outlines becoming visible through his tightening shirt. He leaned back against a wall as his body began to heat up. He looked up at the sun, wondering if the weather was changing, when he noticed strands of his hair beginning to enter his vision. He shook his head as his growing hair tumbled down past his ears and onto his face. His breathing began to increase as his body continued to change, pushing him upwards, while his frame started to take on a feminine appearance. He shifted his hips as they widened, stretching his pants to their limit. He took a deep breath as his chest expanded again, his pecs filling with supple fat as his shirt stretched against them. He nervously ran a delicate new finger between the soft flesh of his chest, tracing his growing cleavage in confusion as pleasurable sensations began to spark from his touch. A sudden pain emanated from his mouth, accompanied by a crunching sound. He screamed in shock as he covered his mouth, feeling the changes with his tongue. He began to panic as he felt his teeth sharpening into animal-like fangs. He slowly opened his mouth and poked one of his new teeth with the trembling hand, nearly drawing blood as he did so. It felt like he had a collection of knives in his mouth now, confusing the boy even more. So much was changing so quickly that he barely noticed his aging body continuing to fill out, his ass and breasts jiggling with every panicked motion he made. "Somebody help me," he screamed, but to his horror, the street was suddenly empty. Eddie fell to his knees as the changes began to grow more intense. His widening hips and thickening thighs tore open his jeans, revealing soft, smooth skin beneath. His growing chest did the same with his shirt, lifting it up to expose a toned midriff as it tore from his rapidly growing bosom. He no longer looked like a boy, but like a well-endowed woman well into her 20s. The changes weren't stopping there, however. He clenched his sharp new fangs and reached up to his head as he felt something twitching beneath his scalp. He wanted to cry as he felt two feline ears sprouting from between his growing hair. The sounds of the city grew more intense as he began to hear things miles away, his new ears twitching at every touch. His mind raced as it took control of his new ears, feeding the sounds of his changing body right back into his head. He fell to all fours as his new breasts burst out of his shirt, his enlarged nipples sending confusing but pleasurable sensations through his body as they brushed the city air. He groaned again as his spine cracked inwards, almost sounding like more of a roar than a groan. His voice was becoming feminine, but beastly, like there was an animal trapped inside him. Tears rolled down his cheeks and drool dripped off his fangs as he struggled to understand what was happening. Then he had a realization. He told that old man he wanted to be a tiger. Was that strange candy doing this to him? He thought about trying to throw it up, but before he could even try, he felt more intense sensations building all around his body. With another growth spurt, Eddie's closed her open and fluttered away in the breeze, leaving him naked and terrified. He sprawled out as he felt a pressure building in his spine. He listened to the cracks of his elongating spine with vivid detail thanks to his new ears, and when he looked back, he saw a long, furry tiger tail swinging around just above his supple new ass. "I'm sorry, I don't want to be a girl, I don't want to be a tiger," he screamed to no listeners. His voice was sounding more feral by the second, his groans sounding more like growls as his skeleton began to shift itself into a more feline position. His legs cracked as his feet gained flexibility, toughening and stretching to give him the ability to traverse rough terrain with ease. His fingers spasmed as razor-sharp claws sprouted out of his fingernails. He arched his back and swung his tail around for balance as he was forced into a cat-like position, as if he was ready to pounce on his prey. He shook his head as striped fur began to replace his hair, growing down the side of his face and matching the patterns on his ears and tail. His eyes began to focus on little details, like birds flying overhead, or the patterns on the pavement, as his vision grew more perceptive. "No, not a tiger-roarer," he screamed as his voice continued to devolve. He continued to reluctantly roar as his muscles spasmed, flexing and tensing up as they swelled with power. He was filled with so much strength that he felt like he couldn't control it. He trembled with strength as his skin began to sprout the same striped fur from his head and tail, spreading and covering his bulging new muscles. He furrowed his brow as he felt it cascading down his face, tickling as it went. His sharp claws dug into the pavement as he felt the last part of his masculinity receding between his legs. More roars echoed down the empty street as he felt a pleasure unlike anything he could have imagined. His tail instinctively traced the moist opening between his legs where his dick had been, sending even more confusing pleasures through his stimulated body. He didn't know how to process the new desires coming from his feline sex, but he felt like there was a bestial urge growing to be filled. Images of potential mates flooded his mind, driving him even further into a feral rage. Pushing himself back up onto his knees, he looked down to see the half-human remnants of his once boyish body. He balanced on his new paws with ease as his tail swung around behind him. The dripping sex between his legs was totally alien to him, but the orgasmic sensations pulsing from it were utterly intoxicating. The need to satisfy his new urges was growing, and he was powerless to stop it. He grabbed his head as he felt more pressure building in his skull. He could feel his thoughts simplifying with each passing second. Then, with a sudden crack, his human visage began to give way to something beastly. He threw his arms back and roared in pain as his skull cracked outwards. The fur continued to cover his body as his mouth extended, making way for the fangs. He'd grown in the process. His tongue grew long and rogue, perfect for licking meat clean off the bone. His jaw strengthened as his bite force multiplied, leaving him with a perfect maw to take down any prey. His brain began to mold itself to fit into his bestial new skull, forcing out his old human worries and desires. He bared his fangs in a desperate last attempt to remember his old human life, but the beast within was simply too powerful. His pussy quivered as simple thoughts of mating flooded his mind. He wanted to be mounted, to have cubs, to indulge in the pleasures of this terrifying feline body. He rolled around, trying to resist his new urges, but as the fur finally covered the last of his human skin, he began to give in to the simplicity of being less than human. No more school, no more parents, no more bullies, No more rules. All she had to do now was hunt, eat, and mate. The new tigress grinned as she embraced her new life. She was a hunter, a beast, and soon to be an urban legend for this part of town. She reveled in stalking the weak little humans up and down their streets, completely unaware of her presence. She would be the story parents told their kids at night to keep them home and keep them behaving properly, lest the beast of the night swipe them away for a quick meal. She laughed as she thought of her old life, and how she was so much more now. She had nothing as a weak little boy, but now she would have a legacy, a Halloween legend. She purred as she sat up, excitement growing in her to stalk the streets from the shadows. She thought of her master, the one who'd given her this gift, and wondered if he'd bestow it upon anyone else. Ah, there you are, my beautiful beast. You turned out lovely. Isn't this better than running around asking for candy? The man said, stepping out of the shadows and admiring his latest creation. Yesus, thank you. The tigress purred, kneeling before her master. The man scratched her ears and chuckled at his magnificent beast. He saw how wet she was and decided to give her some motivation. Say, if you go out tonight and cause some real chaos, really scare those kids, I'll make a new mate for you. The tigress bent forward and let her tongue drop in desire, quivering at the thought of another she could mate with. She couldn't wait to reveal her new form to the town citizens.